for day 2 of your poetry unit written assessment, you're going to work on your body paragraph. So this is the assignment. Right in the center, you see the information about your body paragraph. Keep in mind you're required to do one body paragraph. However, if at any point you change topics, then naturally you should start a new paragraph when you change topic. Your requirement is at least 5 to 8 sentences. If you go over, that is fine. For some of you who have more than 2 pieces of evidence, that will probably happen because you need interpretation of your literary device and analysis. So in the body paragraph, you're going to be analyzing the author's use of poetic device. Remember, your overall goal in your response is to identify a central idea of the text, which you would have done in your intro. That's your thesis statement or the last sentence of your intro. That central idea statement becomes that thesis. And now you're ready to analyze your poetic devices. So in your body paragraph, you analyze how the author uses poetic devices, metaphor, parallel structure, tone, alliteration, etc. to develop the central idea. You may choose to just focus on one literary element or poetic device, so multiple examples of metaphors, or you might do like one example of a metaphor, one example of a tone, one example of juxtaposition. Sometimes you even have a quote or a line that has 2 different literary elements in the same quote. So in that case, you might just give one piece of evidence and say how it's an example of parallel structure and juxtaposition, or whatever the case may be. Overall, though, you need 2 to 3 pieces of strong and thorough evidence. The goal is that your evidence is an example of a literary element, and in addition to that, connects back to your central idea. That is what a strong piece of evidence would be. You want to properly cite your evidence, so Gorman, author last name and line number, and make sure you have a clear analysis of each piece of evidence. If you go down to the rubric, for evidence, you need 3 pieces of evidence for the advanced, 2 pieces for proficient. It works down from there. You can have 3 pieces of evidence, and if they do not support your central idea or they don't relate, then you might still end up at this needs improvement mark. Okay? I'm going to go back over to the modules, and if you look at, back over to the slides. For today, you want to make sure that your introduction is complete. I'll be meeting with you individually to answer questions and give feedbacks. Our goal is that today you're writing your body paragraph. Next class, you'll write your conclusion, and then your final will be due Friday the 26th. So let's check out a sample body paragraph, what that should look like. I have to give credit to Riley Hayden. This was her piece of writing, and I made some changes to it, so it's not exactly what she has, but that's where I started working from. I'm using Wordsworth, I'd wandered lonely as a cloud in this analysis. Remember, this is just the body paragraph. So in the first sentence, the writer introduces what poetic device they are going to be discussing in the paper, and then also restates the central idea. So she stated, Wordsworth uses symbolism, or the use of an object to represent an idea in the poem, to emphasize that small joys are often overlooked, but are the first to help one recover from difficult times. So in that first sentence again, you see they talk about symbolism. So introduces that the literary device that she'll be analyzing is symbolism. She gives the definition of symbolism. Is the definition required? No. Is it helpful? Yes, because it proves to me that you understand what that literary element means. On the Regents, when you take in 11th grade, that can be very helpful, because sometimes people mention a piece of evidence that maybe is an example of metaphor and imagery. So if you're analyzing for metaphor, you need to know that you understand what it is. And then they just restated, or I should say she restated her central idea by saying essentially the same idea but in a different way. One symbol in this poem is a cloud, she continues. At the beginning of the poem, the speaker says, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over the vales and hills. Weird language by Wordsworth, lines 1 to 2. By comparing himself to the cloud, it shows he feels lonely like one single cloud. Okay, so here, they introduce the first symbol, which is the cloud. She uses a nice transitional statement at the beginning of the poem. And then she gives a specific piece of evidence. This is very relevant evidence because it mentions that symbol of the cloud. Then she goes into her analysis. She says it shows he feels lonely like one single cloud. So she's showing that she understands what that symbol means. And in this case, you could even consider that a metaphor. So that word cloud is standing for loneliness. But she doesn't stop there. She continues with another sentence of analysis. So she could have easily just said, it shows he feels lonely like the single cloud. The cloud therefore represents loneliness. However, she continues by saying, further, the wandering cloud represents the speaker's feeling of aimlessness because of a cloud's tendency to drift where the wind blows. So just another really specific piece of analysis that's coming from her own brain. Then we have another transitional statement. As he continues to wander, he comes upon a myriad of daffodils, a symbol of small joys. Okay, so again, we have a second symbol, the daffodils, and she explicitly states what they represent, small joys. She says daffodils are yellow, a color associated with happiness and joy. So again, this is not information that comes from the text. This is just something that she knows, that yellow is usually associated with or symbolic of happiness and joy. More importantly, the speaker explicitly states that a poet cannot be but gay in such jocund company. So another specific quote from the text, and that word gay relates to happiness. And she says in her analysis, he feels that it's impossible to be sad in the company of daffodils. So she's explaining the meaning of that quote. Later, when he returns home, the speaker states that he often remembers the daffodils when he is in a vacant or pensive mood, and his heart fills with pleasures and dances with the daffodils. So in this sentence, the idea of the vacant or pensive mood and dances with the daffodils aren't really symbols in and of themselves, but here she's trying to relate back to that central idea that small joys are often overlooked but can help someone recover from difficult times. So when he is having a difficult time in a vacant or pensive mood, he thinks about the daffodils, and that symbol of joy, the daffodils, brings him feelings of pleasure. And then finally, you don't want to end off with just a quote. So Riley had to figure out a way to bring her ideas together. And so she said, the cloud is no longer mentioned after the poet sees the flowers, showing that the tone changed from desolate to cheerful through the use of symbols of the cloud and the daffodil. So again, she mentions the cloud, the first symbol, which was a symbol of loneliness, and then the flowers, which brought the poet company. And so that the impact of that on the reader is that it changes the tone from desolate to cheerful. And what a great way to end. So she's talking about the impact of those symbols on the poem and the changing tone, bringing in a new idea. Okay, so your goal today is to finish the body paragraph. If you finish that, your next steps are to move on to the concluding paragraph. I'll be talking about that more in depth next class, but the link for how to write a conclusion is on the second page of that intro document that we looked at the other day. So if you feel like at any point you're ready to move on, go ahead, but I won't be talking about it until next class.